arson.
Used, threatened, and coerced women and others around him to fulfill his sexual desires, protect his reputation, and conceal his conduct.
As alleged, when Combs didn't get his way, he was violent, and he subjected victims to physical, emotional, and verbal abuse.
Combs' arrest at a New York City hotel Monday night comes 6 months after federal authorities raided the Grammy winners' homes in Los Angeles and Miami, today revealing what they say they found: firearms, including 3 defaced AR-15s in his bedroom closet, and videos of elaborately produced sex performances with multiple victims, known as freak-offs, according to prosecutors.
Freak-offs sometimes lasted days at a time, involved multiple commercial sex workers, and often involved a variety of narcotics, such as ketamine, ecstasy, and GHB, which Combs distributed to the victims to keep them obedient and compliant.
An attorney for Combs maintaining his client's innocence.
Mr. Combs is a fighter. He's going to fight this to the end. He's innocent.
Today's federal case following a string of civil suits, including one filed last week by a member of the girl group Diddy Combs, as well as a settlement with singer Cassie, seen in this 2016 surveillance video being physically attacked by Combs. Cassie later filing a civil suit accusing Combs of raping and physically abusing her. The terms of their 2023 settlement were not disclosed. An attorney for Combs telling a judge today that Mr. Combs is not a perfect person. These toxic relationships were mutual, adding, "Is it sex trafficking if everyone wants to be there? We don't want the federal government in our bedroom." But tonight, federal prosecutors are leaving the door open for even more arrests, saying Combs did not act alone.
I'm not taking anything off the table.
And Chloe was in the courtroom. Chloe, how did Combs react to the judge's decision to keep him in custody?
Lester, I was sitting just a few feet away from Combs during his arraignment, and he was completely expressionless as the judge denied him bond, and then he was cooperatively escorted away by U.S. Marshals. His attorney now saying that they plan to appeal this decision as early as tomorrow. Lester?
All right, Chloe Malas, thank you. Our senior legal correspondent, Laura Jarrett, is here with us. Let me pick up on that train of thought. What was the judge's reasoning for not giving him bail?
Yeah, Combs had offered to put up $50 million as a bond, but it simply did not work, Lester. Prosecutors went in today saying he's a flight risk, a danger to the community, and the judge agreed, finding that she was worried about his substance abuse issues as alleged by prosecutors and anger issues she also described here. Now, we've seen high-profile defendants detained pre-trial before. You think about R. Kelly, you think about Jeffrey Epstein. His attorney says he's going to try to appeal this denial of the bail, but if it doesn't work, he could be denied a appeal for a long time here and behind bars for more than a year as this goes to trial, Lester.
Okay, Laura, thank you.
Tonight, explosions like this across Lebanon. As the Hezbollah militant group says, hundreds of pagers belonging to its members detonated simultaneously, calling it a massive coordinated attack and blaming Israel. Look again. The explosion injures the man with the pager, but causes almost no damage around him. Lebanon says almost 3,000 people were wounded, including the Iranian ambassador, and at least 9 killed, among them several children. Iranian-backed Hezbollah uses pagers to avoid Israeli surveillance. Israel tonight refusing to say if it was behind what appears to be an unprecedented intelligence operation.
Have you ever seen anything on this scale before?
No, I haven't. It really is a remarkable sort of milestone in the pantheon of intelligence.
Joining me now is former prosecutor and MSNBC legal analyst Kristen Gibbons-Fedden. She famously helped prosecute the case against Bill Cosby. MSNBC legal analyst and former prosecutor Christy Greenberg prosecuted sex crimes as an assistant U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York. And NBC legal correspondent Lisa Rubin is with me here on set. Let's talk about the charges, and I think related to the depth of them. Is that we just learned the defense is proposing a $50 million bond in an attempt to get their client released.
Well, I think the fact that they're proposing a $50 million bond speaks to how serious the charges against Sean Combs are. So let's go through them from top to bottom. The first is a racketeering conspiracy charge. And I'm sure when some of our viewers hear that, their eyes glaze over. But essentially what that means is that Sean Combs built an enterprise consisting of his businesses, but also of personal employees and people loyal to him to help him basically accomplish these sex crimes with which he has been charged. And not only did they help him accomplish these sex crimes, they did a bunch of other criming with him, according to prosecutors, in order to cover it up or to keep his victims silent. He's also been charged, Chris, with sex trafficking under force or coercion or transportation with the intent to engage in prostitution. And critical to the allegations are the severity of the violence alleged, use of guns, forced drugging, arson, and kidnapping, all alleged and suffused throughout not only this indictment, but the detention letter that prosecutors sent to the judge today, where they outline in 16 pages why Sean Combs should not be released from federal custody prior to his trial. That's why you see Sean Combs and his lawyers saying, hey, we'll put up a $50 million bond package consisting of a $48 million home that I own outright and other things.
So, Kristen, I want to play some of what we heard earlier from prosecutors.
This office is determined to investigate and prosecute anyone who engages in sex trafficking, no matter how powerful or wealthy or famous you may be. No one should doubt our commitment on that. A year ago, Sean Combs stood in Times Square and was handed a key to New York City. Today, he's been indicted and will face justice in the Southern District of New York.
So to me, honestly, Kristen, that sounds pretty straightforward. But then I read the indictment. And the level of depravity that's just alleged there, that's described there, it's certainly nothing I've ever seen, but you have the experience. Put it into context for us.
Yeah. So what happens is, and I think one of the things that's interesting, Chris, and he was actually asked this at the press conference about, okay, if you have this indictment that outlines this depravity, how is it that just a year prior you give him the key? How is it that we didn't know that any of this was going on? And one of the things that I think is really important is that throughout the pre-detention letter that Lisa was alluding to, they talked to, I think they said they gave around 300 grand jury subpoenas, spoke to around 50 victims and witnesses who are able to really substantiate or corroborate one another with the allegations that are set forth in this indictment. So I think one of the things is, well, then how did this go on so long? But you have to remember that sexual assault, particularly when it's against someone as powerful as Puff Daddy, particularly when you have the facilitation of some type of intoxicants, you're talking about ketamine and all of those drug-fueled parties, and then you go up against someone whose reputation is such that he was awarded the key to the city, you have a very large power imbalance, which further levels onto that coercion and further forces victims to be silenced. So that level of depravity, even though it's so horrific, can really cause it to be silenced when you have someone as powerful as Puff Daddy.
Yeah, Christy, to be honest with you, again, when I read through it, it was like, how did this go on for so long? Again, allegedly. And no one spoke up, or, I mean, there have been other cases in the past related to him. But let me ask you what you, as someone who has prosecuted sex crimes at the SDNY, what stands out to you in the indictment?
So one thing I would say in prosecuting sex trafficking cases, oftentimes they are undetected for decades, like this one. I unfortunately have prosecuted sex trafficking cases that have gone on for decades. And a lot of the reasons why the victims don't say anything earlier are, even when the facts are different across cases, the ultimate reasons tend to be the same, because these traffickers know that they can instill a culture of fear. And that culture of fear really prevents them from speaking up. Here you had force, you had violence, you had U.S. Attorney Damian Williams saying that these victims felt they could not leave because their own security was at risk if they did. And there is actual video evidence of that when one of the victims was trying to leave a hotel room, trying to leave one of those freak offs, And what happened? Sean Combs violently beat her. That is on tape. So to the extent any juror, any member of the public questions, well, why didn't she leave? You can see the evidence of why she didn't leave sooner. It's right there on tape. I will say that in terms of looking at this indictment and looking at the detention letter that was submitted by the prosecutors here, this is among the strongest sex trafficking cases I have seen, because you have the conduct on tape. These freak-offs are on tape, found in videos, in Sean Combs' own personal devices. You have recorded calls where he is then trying to have them and engage in a false narrative to conceal the evidence of the crime once it was determined that the law enforcement officials were looking into this. That evidence is damning. In addition to having the victims coming forward and corroborating one another's accounts, the fact that you have video evidence, they can see and hear Mr. Combs threatening and hurting victims. I mean, this case really seems incredibly strong.
So given that, given the details, given the strength of the case that the prosecutors say they have, Lisa, what will the judge consider if they offer this $50 million so he can be free while this case is going to trial?
Well, you know, as Christy and Kristen know well, the dangerousness of the individual to the community, as well as the likelihood that they will and have the capacity to flee, are two factors that a judge considers. One of the things that Sean Combs' lawyers have told the judge is acknowledging that he owns a plane. They say that there's a letter of intent to sell that plane, and as part of that, he won't take the plane right now. But where you have a defendant who owns private aviation, the capacity to flee is there. The other thing is that the dangerousness of Sean Combs should not be underscored. In addition to the allegations of literally hitting, dragging, kicking his victims, I'm reading from the detention letter now. There's an incident where he and a co-conspirator kidnapped an individual at gunpoint to facilitate breaking and entering into the residence of another. Approximately 2 weeks later, according to prosecutors, co-conspirators then set fire to that individual's vehicle, and that multiple witnesses would testify to the defendant, meaning Sean Combs, bragging about his role in destroying individual one's car. This is not a white-collar defendant who has committed alleged securities fraud. This is a person who is a danger to the community and a danger to women, according to the Southern District of New York, Chris.
So we have less than a minute, but let me ask you, Kristen, what happens today? What happens next?
So today the judge will most likely determine whether or not he will detain Puff Daddy or whether he will allow him to remain on the streets, as we say, with certain bail conditions intact. He's either going to put him right to jail or he's going to say, hey, you got to sell that plane. You've got to surrender your passport. There may be certain things in place, such as electronic monitoring or anything along those lines. But I think that there is a strong case for him to be detained throughout the pendency of these criminal proceedings.
And we will have our crew write what you see on your screen, where you see on your screen outside that courthouse at 2:30 when it's all set to begin. Kristen Gibbons-Fetting, Christy Greenberg, Lisa Rubin, thank you all. I want to bring in the executive director of When We All Vote, Beth Link. It's good to have you back on the show, Beth. You're
joining us now, NBC's Chloe Melas outside the courthouse in Lower Manhattan. Lisa Rubin, MSNBC legal correspondent, is with us as well. So, Chloe, you're down at the courthouse. What are we expecting to learn about these charges today?
Hey there, Jose. Well, in about 30 minutes, we're going to hear from the U.S. Attorney's Office. They're going to be holding a press conference right down the street. And according to Mark Agnifilo, one of the attorneys for Sean Diddy Combs, who you just saw moments ago speaking to reporters outside of the courthouse, he had said that Combs was actually inside. He's waiting to be arraigned. We still don't have a time for that. I just want to say, look, I'm holding the indictment right here. And they talk about how Combs's alleged abuse was verbal, emotional, physical, sexual. And it goes on to talk about these freak-offs, these sex parties where Sean Combs allegedly manipulated women to be a part of these highly orchestrated sexual performances with also commercial sex workers that he allegedly flew from out of the country and also within the United States across state lines. And also, it wasn't just female sex workers, it was male sex workers as well. They claimed that Sean Combs would also videotape these sex workers and use it as blackmail against them to continue to keep them either silenced and afraid, and also would sometimes withhold payment. They talk about kidnapping, arson. There's a litany of accusations in here. And again, it will be interesting to see what authorities say at this press conference. Remember, NBC News was first to report that over the summer, a grand jury was hearing evidence from alleged accusers. And that also, remember, his homes were raided both in Florida and in California. And this was last spring. And, you know, at the time, NBC News reported that they seized cell phones, they seized guns. They talk about those guns, those AR-15s with some of the serial numbers scratched off on them. And again, Combs, he's denying all of the accusations against him. And, you know, I just want to point out that damning video, the surveillance video of Sean Diddy Combs beating up Cassandra Cassie Ventura, his girlfriend at the time, who filed a sweeping civil suit against him last year, in which at the time he denied ever being possible to actually engage in physical violence. And then that surveillance video came out showing him beating up Cassie at a hotel in 2016, and he had to walk back his initial denial and then apologize, which he claimed was a one-off incident. But it's not a one-off incident, according to federal authorities, who claim that this behavior went on for years and that he uses businesses to allegedly hide his behavior for decades. Jose?
Yeah, and Lisa, you know, when one reads this indictment, these 14 pages, I mean, I'm just wondering what stuck out to you as being the most significant one of all of these charges?
Jose, that's a very difficult question to answer because on each and every one of these 14 pages, I think I gasped at the severity of the charges here. Mark Agnifilo, the attorney that Chloe was just referring to, said earlier today that his client is an imperfect person. But if a jury were to find that Sean Combs engaged in any one of these three charges, he'd be far beyond imperfect. He'd be a person that we would all agree was grotesque and a monster for engaging in some of these behaviors. I think what stood out to me is how long Sean Combs was able to conceal the alleged behavior here through a variety of coercive techniques that span the gamut from the use of guns, plying his victims with drugs with respect to those freak-offs that Chloe was referring to, the fact that there were commercial sex workers involved here that were allegedly trafficked both across state lines but also internationally, the fact that there is video evidence because Sean Combs allegedly videoed these freak-offs and used them to intimidate his victims, essentially saying, look at what I have against you. I have videotapes of you engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. And the other thing that really stands out to me here, Jose, is the involvement of a panoply of unnamed people in and around Sean Combs's life, whether as personal assistants or security personnel, people who are high-ranking executives in his businesses. There are a lot of people here who are and could be accountable for the way in which they facilitated this abuse and conspired with him to make it happen. Those people here, unless they are already cooperating with prosecutors, and there's a good chance that they have some of these people as witnesses, many of them could face their own criminal liability here. There are references, for example, to staff concealing and hiding some of Sean Combs's victims in either his residences or hotels because they were so physically injured that for them to have been seen publicly would have been risking disclosing what was really going on. They're also alleged to have reserved the sex workers to have arranged in their transportation. This is an enterprise for a reason because it took a whole lot more people other than just Sean Combs to make the abuse and the trafficking happen. And we should continue to watch to see who is participating in the U.S. Attorney's Office's investigation and who might even face some charges here alongside Sean Combs. There are a bunch of people here looking at this 14-page instrument who should be nervous across the city or perhaps in other locations like Los Angeles and Miami. Jose?
Yeah, and Lisa, I mean, and let me just go to the fourth point brought up on just page 2 of this indictment. It says physical abuse by Sean Combs, the defendant, was recurrent and widely known on numerous occasions from at least in or about 2009 and continuing for years. Combs assaulted women by, among other things, striking, punching, dragging, throwing objects at, and kicking them. These assaults were at times witnessed by others. And then, of course, they include that Los Angeles hotel videotape of March of 2016. Lisa, this is, as you say, possibly involving a whole slew of people.
Absolutely. And I just want to be very clear about differentiating between witnessing conduct and being a part of an alleged criminal enterprise. Just simply being a bystander to this doesn't make somebody a participant in the criminal enterprise, but actively taking steps to conspire with the head of an enterprise is what's being alleged here, that these people, for example, at Sean Combs' encouragement and direction, did things like reserve hotel rooms, kidnap and conceal certain of his victims, obtain drugs and or IV fluids that were used to essentially sustain and rehydrate them after these freak-offs, which were, as Chloe described them, sex parties or sex marathons that in some cases lasted for days and imposed real physical injury and harm to some of the women who were involved, who were drugged throughout it. That takes the active participation, not just the knowledge and witnessing of other people. And so, as I said earlier, there must be a number of people in Sean Combs' life, whether they are personal assistants or security personnel, people who work at Bad Boy Entertainment or others of his businesses, that were directly involved here. And if they are not already cooperating with the feds, many people are probably having that conversation this morning with lawyers, including those that they have never met. I would imagine that there are a number of criminal defense attorneys across the city whose phones are ringing right now, Jose.
Yeah, and I mean, there's nothing party about these freak-offs. If this is, again, proven to be something that actually existed, and they may have existed over and over again. And Lisa, the indictment also alleges that during these freak-offs, Combs distributed a variety of controlled substances to the victims, in part to keep the victims obedient and compliant. Sometimes unbeknownst to the victims, Combs kept videos he filmed of the victims engaging in sex acts with commercial sex workers. With the reference to these videos that Combs apparently kept, what does it say about the potential evidence prosecutors have in their possession?
Well, we know, for example, that Combs' homes in both Los Angeles and Miami were raided last March. We can bet that among the evidence that prosecutors were able to obtain were some of these videos. Of course, prosecutors also have other video evidence in their possession that's referenced in this indictment, including that 2016 surveillance tape of Combs with his then girlfriend, Cassie Ventura, who sued him civilly last November. That incident is referenced in the indictment. But as you note, Jose, the fact that prosecutors are saying here that Combs often took videotapes of his victims engaged in sex acts with commercial sex workers means that they have a reason to put that in this instrument. They have reasonable cause to put that here. And that likely means that many of those videotapes are within their possession and could be shown to a jury if and when this case goes to trial, Jose.
As Lisa, there's also the issue here, as I'm looking at page 7 and 8. It says that members and associates of Combs Enterprises, including Combs security personnel, at times carried firearms. That in and of itself is not illegal. But in or about March 2024, during searches of Combs' residences in Miami and in Los Angeles, law enforcement seized firearms and ammunition, including 3 AR-15s with defaced serial numbers. What does that tell you? Because it isn't illegal. For example, I know that in the state of Florida, it is not illegal to possess ARs, but defaced serial numbers on them is.
Yeah, and the fact that these weapons were found in his possession proves to me that they are trying to elude or evade detection, that these weapons were likely purchased on a black market. And, you know, Jose, the very presence of guns in this indictment is something that differentiates it from some of sort of the other major sex predation, if not trafficking, cases that we've seen over the last few years. I'm thinking namely of Jeffrey Epstein and Harvey Weinstein. What differentiates some of this is the guns and the drugs in particular, but also how much more visible the presence of other staff is. You know, we know, for example, from both the Epstein and Weinstein situations, that there were people around both of them that facilitated them. And yet, for the most part, with the exception of Ghislaine Maxwell, most of those people were never held to account, criminally or otherwise. This is the Southern District of New York in stating that there was a criminal conspiracy here, making it absolutely transparent. This did not exist without the cooperation, active engagement, and participation of a whole host of others that they say were known and unknown to them. But the fact that they know who many of these people are, those people should be scared this morning, because either they're going to end up being witnesses at trial, or they may see their name on the other side of what we call the verses in a criminal instrument.
But join
Me smoke weed until me eye red, but me no red eye. If I coke you a promote you a go dead eye. Higher, 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 grade man a smoke. The high grade get me where me want to be. High wise, make me feel like a bird. Fly wise. Higher, 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 grade man a smoke. We not go wait for 420 fi get high. From morning till night, we are chill out in the sky. Higher, 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 grade man a smoke. From used to smoking it, I go on you now fi ask half a kush. Cause real weed man, we no smoke bush. Smoke higher, just the higher, higher, grade man a smoke. I never mix me high grade like how the rhythm it a mix. From the bud pick off of the tree, you know say everything fixed. Along with the sweet reggae music, just me and that give me kicks. So I smoke from Westmoreland straight on to the west side. Them say the high grade from the west side is the best side. From me touch Amsterdam, me smoke until my brain glide. And if the vibes feel wrong, high grade put it on the right side. So just light up the chalice and pass it to the left. Cause when the coach load, nothing more, nothing less. The real high grade are coming from St. Best. So tell the Babylon them no fit test. Me smoke weed until me eye red, but me no red eye. If I coke you a promote you a go dead eye. Higher, 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 grade man a smoke. The high grade get me where me want to be. High wise, make me feel like a bird. Fly wise. Higher, 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 grade man a smoke. We now go wait for 420 fi get high. From morning till night, we are chill out in the sky. Higher, 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 grade man a smoke. From used to smoking it, I go on you now fi ask half a kush. Cause real weed man, we no smoke bush. Smoke higher, just the higher, higher, grade man a smoke. I like to chill out with my family and friends, them pan the corner. Hold a meditation while smoking marijuana. Like the purple more time, like it green, just like iguana. That's why me have to yell up every farmer. We give me entertainment like Tristan Palmer. I make we go and hold the other. So just go and smoke the weed and be brave. High grade was found up on Solomon's grave. That means say you're from ancient days. Them a try give you things fit change your ways. But make the chalice go and blaze. Me smoke weed until me eye red, but me no red eye. If I coke you a promote you a go dead eye. Higher, 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 high grade man a smoke. The high grade get me where me want to be. High wise, make me feel like a bird. Fly wise. Higher, 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 high grade man a smoke. We now go wait for 420 fi get high. From morning till night, we are chill out in the sky. Higher, 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 high grade man a smoke. From used to smoking it a go on, you not fi ask half a kush. Cause real weed man we no smoke bush. Smoke high, just the high, high grade man a smoke.